My name is Ethan and I'm 25. I make my home in a quiet suburb just a stone's throw from Indianapolis. Building things, working with my hands, that's always been my language. While all my buddies were chasing degrees or settling into cubicles, I dedicated myself to a different path. For 5 years, I was a sponge, soaking up every bit of knowledge I could about carpentry and home repair, banking every spare cent I earned. My ambition was to launch my own handyman and custom solutions business. A few months back, that dream finally became a reality. It's far from glamorous at the moment. I operate out of an old Chevy Express van that groans to life every morning. And my tools are a collection of second-hand pieces I've painstakingly restored myself. I've got a couple of reliable drills, a miter saw I got for a steal, and the most basic orbital sander you can imagine. But every piece is functional, and that's what I needed to get the wheels turning. I called my venture Ethan Hayes Handyman Services, and I even designed and printed a stack of simple business cards at a local copy shop. In the beginning, my clientele consisted solely of my aunt and a handful of folks from her church. I wasn't exactly turning a profit. Most of the work was done for a token payment or just for the experience. I understood that building a reputation was the first most crucial step. I made a promise to myself. Treat every job, whether it's fixing a squeaky hinge or a full room renovation, like it's for a showcase home. That's how you make a name for yourself. One sweltering afternoon, I was hunched over my small desk in my apartment, meticulously cleaning my tools and fighting off the growing anxiety about whether I'd ever land a truly substantial client. My phone vibrated against the wood. The number was unfamiliar. "Hello," I answered, trying to sound more established than I was. A voice, smooth and articulate, replied on the other end. "Hello. I was referred by a former colleague of mine. I'm looking for someone with expertise in custom interior work, specifically soundproofing. Is that something you handle?" I immediately sat bolt upright. "Yes, absolutely. I specialize in that. I could come by for a consultation tomorrow if that suits you." She provided an address in one of the more affluent neighborhoods. The heavy front door swung inward. My first impression of her is etched in my memory. She appeared to be in her early 40s, tall and composed, dressed in simple linen trousers and a silk blouse that, despite its casualness, spoke of quality and significant expense. Her blonde hair was elegantly pulled into a low bun. She wore no jewelry besides a pair of simple pearl earrings, and had on no makeup, save for a subtle touch of color on her lips. "Hi, I'm Sophia," she said, her smile polite but reserved. "You must be Ethan." "Yes, ma'am. It's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for the call." "There's no need for ma'am," she responded with a light, airy laugh. "Sophia is just fine." She guided me through her stunning home to a room on the ground floor that served as a study. She gestured around the space, explaining her needs. "I'm a musician," she stated, "and I need this room to be completely soundproofed. I've had a couple of contractors look at it, but they either seemed out of their depth or simply stopped returning my calls." I nodded, already taking mental measurements, my mind racing with material lists and construction methods. "I can assure you the final result will be better than you expect." I began my assessment immediately. It was a humid Indiana day, and I could feel a bead of sweat tracing a path down my spine within minutes. My laser measure was new and worked flawlessly, a small victory in itself. I was meticulous, checking the wall density, the window seals, the door frame, everything that could potentially leak sound. I even pointed out a subtle vibration coming from an HVAC vent that would need to be dampened, something she said no one else had noticed. At one point, I glanced up from my notes and saw her standing in the doorway watching me with a focused intensity. I offered a brief professional smile and returned to my work. About an hour later, as I was finishing my detailed project proposal right there on my tablet, she walked fully into the room. I stood up and wiped my hands on my jeans. "This is incredibly thorough," she said, looking over the plan I'd outlined. "You genuinely understand the science behind it." "Thank you. I believe in treating every project with the respect it deserves." Then, with a faint, almost challenge, filled the time with small-scale jobs for some new contacts, fixing leaky faucets, hanging ceiling fans, even assembling a complex piece of Swedish furniture for a frustrated couple. I was still in the trenches hustling for any work I could get my hands on. Each evening, I would check my email and phone, anticipating the official go-ahead from Sophia, but there was nothing. I fought to keep my discouragement at bay, telling myself, "You're just building your foundation." Then, on Thursday morning, my phone chimed with an incoming call. It was her, Sophia. I let it ring once more before composing myself and answering. "Hello. Hi, Ethan. Sophia. I hope this isn't a bad time." "Not at all. What can I do for you?" I asked, focusing on keeping my voice even and professional. "I was wondering if you might have a moment to stop by again. There's a minor issue with a wobbly bookshelf in my living room. I know it's a tiny job compared to the soundproofing project, but I was so impressed with your attention to detail. I was hoping you could take a look." "Of course. I can be there this afternoon if that works for you." "That would be perfect." I ended the call staring at my phone for a second. It wasn't just about the big project. She was already thinking of me for other things. A returning client and a high-value one at that. I gathered a small tool bag and headed over in the van. Pulling into her driveway, I noticed again how immaculate everything was. I grabbed my tools and went straight to work on the bookshelf. It was a large built-in unit, and a few of the shelves had clearly been overloaded over the years. I wanted to impress her again, not just for the potential future work, but because my name was on the line. After about 40 minutes of carefully reinforcing the supports and leveling the shelves, I became aware of Sophia standing nearby, her arms crossed loosely as she observed me. She was dressed in stylish athletic wear, her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, looking effortlessly chic. "You really are meticulous," she remarked as I stepped back to check my work with a level. "Precision is the most important part of the job," I replied. She smiled. "Not many people believe that anymore." We chatted for a few minutes while I worked. It was relaxed, easy conversation about last minute, but I've made far too much food for dinner. "Would you be interested in staying to eat? Please consider it a proper thank you. You must be hungry after a day's work." I blinked, taken aback. It was highly unusual for a client to invite me to stay for a meal. I wasn't sure how to respond, but she offered a warm, disarming look, as if it were the most normal suggestion in the world. "I'd love to, but I wouldn't want to be an imposition," I said politely. "Nonsense," she dismissed with a wave of her hand. "It's just dinner. Come on, allow yourself a break." Something in her tone made me relax my professional guard just a little. I nodded. "All right, thank you." I put my tools away in the van and followed her inside. Her home was even more impressive when you could take the time to appreciate it. It was modern and minimalist, yet it felt warm and inviting with large windows that bathed the rooms in the soft golden light of the late afternoon. Sophia led me to the kitchen where the island counter was already set for two. She had made a simple but elegant meal of pan-seared salmon with roasted asparagus and lemon. The aroma was incredible. We sat and ate, and the conversation flowed more easily than I could have imagined. She inquired about my business, my background, and my long-term aspirations. I found myself telling her the unvarnished truth that I was operating on a shoestring budget using tools that were older than I was, and that I dreamed of one day having a proper workshop and maybe even an apprentice. "You have a strong sense of purpose," she observed with a soft smile. "That's rare in men your age." I shrugged, feeling a little self-conscious under her praise. "I'm just trying to build something that lasts." After dinner, she opened a bottle of white wine and offered me a glass. I politely refused, explaining that I still had to drive back. "I respect that," she nodded, her gaze lingering on me for a moment. A man with discipline. We sat for a while longer, just talking. It was a strange situation, but it wasn't uncomfortable. There was no awkwardness, just an unexpected rapport between two people from entirely different spheres. As the sky outside began to deepen into twilight, I rose from my seat and thanked her for her hospitality. Word of mouth is powerful in communities like that, and people were impressed with my thoroughness. I was deeply grateful, but the pace was exhausting. Then came Friday afternoon. I was just finishing up installing a new set of custom shelves for a client when my phone buzzed. It was her. "Hello, Ethan. Are you free tomorrow?" I wiped a layer of sawdust and sweat from my forehead and couldn't help but smile. "I believe I can be. What's on your mind?" "It's time to start the music room. I've cleared my schedule for the next few weeks to be available for any questions you might have." I agreed without a moment's hesitation. Sophia had become not only my most promising client, but also a source of unexpected encouragement. I'd be lying if I said I didn't look forward to working at her house. There was something about the atmosphere of her home and her presence that was calming. The next morning, I loaded the van with the materials for the first phase of the project and headed over. As I pulled up, I saw her standing on the front porch, waving with a small, welcoming smile. She was wearing a simple pair of jeans and a fitted black t-shirt, understated, elegant, and effortlessly graceful as always. "Morning, Ethan," she greeted me. "Morning, Sophia. Ready to make some noise before we make it quiet?" We walked to the future music room together. The space had been completely emptied, a blank canvas for my work. It was a large, well-proportioned room, but I could see the challenges ahead: the large window, the hollow corridor, the placement of the electrical outlets. "I know this is a significant undertaking," she acknowledged. "Please take your time. I'll be around the house if you need anything at all." I got to work immediately. The first step was building a completely new decoupled frame inside the existing room. A room within a room. The sun streamed through the window, heating the space relentlessly. Sweat dripped from my chin as I measured, cut, and assembled the new walls, ensuring every connection was perfect. I worked for hours, lost in the rhythm of the task, the hum of my saw, and the precise tap of my hammer. Occasionally, I'd catch a glimpse of Sophia watching me from the hallway or stepping in with a glass of iced water to offer. I tried to refuse at first, wanting to stay focused, but she insisted, and I accepted. Sophia came in and ran her hand over the new wooden studs, her expression one of awe. "Ethan, this is incredible. You've exceeded my expectations already." "Thank you," I said, brushing sawdust from my arms. "This is just the foundation." Then came another one of those unexpected moments. She paused, looking at me with a thoughtful expression, then said, "Listen, I know this is becoming a habit, but would you like to stay for dinner? It's just me and I made way too much pasta. Think of it as a small celebration for the first phase being complete." I hesitated, caught off guard, just as I had been before. This was definitely not standard client-contractor etiquette, but something about her tone, the casual sincerity in her eyes, made it feel completely natural. "Sure," I replied after a moment. "Thank you." I packed up my tools and followed her inside. Her home felt different in the evening, the lights low, casting a warm, peaceful glow. Soft classical music, a cello sonata, played from a hidden speaker in the living room. The scent of garlic and basil filled the air. We sat at the kitchen island again. The conversation picked right back up where we had left off. I told her about growing up, about my father teaching me to use tools, and about the struggles of trying to get a business loan as a young black man with no collateral. Sophia listened with an unnerving intensity, her eyes never leaving mine, asking insightful questions. It never felt like an interrogation. Felt like she was genuinely trying to understand me. "You're very resilient, you know," she said at one point. "Most people would have given up. I don't know if it's resilience or just being too stubborn to quit." I laughed. We finished dinner and she opened another bottle of wine. "I know you won't have any because you're driving," she said with a playful smile. I smiled back. Fair enough. It was late by the time I finally stood to leave. I thanked her again for her generosity. As I walked toward the front door, she followed and placed her hand gently on my forearm just for a second. "I meant what I said. I'm so glad I found you for this project," she said softly. I nodded, not quite sure what to say. My heart was beating because I genuinely loved the challenge of the work, and if I were being honest with myself, our conversations. Sophia was unlike anyone I had ever met. There was a quiet confidence about her, a self-possessed calm that I found magnetic. Every morning when I arrived, she would greet me with that same warm smile that somehow made the impending hours of demanding physical labor feel less daunting. On one of those late summer afternoons, she had called me the night before. "Hi, Ethan. I know you're busy, but I was thinking about the lighting in the music room. The overhead fixture is all wrong. Could you install some recessed lighting instead?" "I'll pick up the supplies and be there tomorrow," I said without hesitation. The next day, I was on a ladder carefully cutting holes in the new ceiling I'd installed, the air thick with drywall dust. As I worked, Sophia came in with 2 cold bottles of water. "You're going to suffocate in here," she joked, handing one up to me. "I've worked in worse," I grinned, pausing to wipe the sweat and dust from my eyes. She lingered in the room, casually watching me work. Our conversations were still friendly and light, but I could feel a definite shift in the undercurrent between us. Little moments, a longer than necessary glance, a shared laugh that felt more intimate than it should have. "I've never had anyone take such care with my home," she said at one point, leaning against the door frame. "You truly love what you do." I nodded, focusing on wiring the first new light fixture. "I'm building a legacy. Every detail matters." She was quiet for a moment after that. "It shows." When I finished, the new lighting completely transformed the room. It was soft, ambient, and professional. I packed up my gear, feeling exhausted but deeply satisfied. "That looks incredible," she said, admiring the effect. "You've earned a break. Would you like to come in for a bit?" The way she asked wasn't overtly flirty. Not exactly. It was casual, but it was laden with an unspoken invitation that I couldn't ignore. I hesitated for only a fraction of a second. "Sure," I said. Inside, she offered me a seat at her kitchen island while she poured herself a glass of wine. I took a bottle of water from her refrigerator. She looked at me with an uncharacteristically serious expression. "I've been thinking," she began, looking me directly in the eye. "You don't have to say yes to this, but I've been considering investing in your business. I see how much this means to you, and I believe in what you're doing." I froze, completely stunned. That was the last thing I ever expected to hear. "Sophia, that's incredibly generous, but I don't know if I could accept something like that." She smiled gently, a knowing look in her eyes. "You don't have to decide now. Just think about it. I want to help you build your legacy." I stood there for a second, feeling utterly thrown. No one, not even my own family, had ever offered me that kind of tangible support before. I nodded slowly. "I'll think about it." "Thank you, Sophia." "Of course," she said softly. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night." I walked back to my van, my mind a chaotic whirl of thoughts and emotions. One part of me, the proud, self-sufficient part, wanted to refuse immediately. I had built this company with my own 2 hands, after all. But another, more practical part of me knew this could change everything. A new van, top-of-the-line equipment, the ability to hire help and take on bigger, more lucrative projects. I drove home in a heavy silence, the weight of her offer pressing down on me. I knew I needed time to think. The next few days were some of the most conflicted I'd ever experienced. I barely slept. My mind was a constant loop of pros and cons. On one hand, I had poured my blood and sweat into every single thing I had. I took immense pride in having built my company from absolute scratch, even if it was still a small, struggling enterprise. On the other hand, Sophia's offer was a lifeline, a shortcut to the future I was working so hard to build. Could change my entire trajectory overnight. By Wednesday, I knew I couldn't let it hang in the air any longer. I had to talk to her. I called and asked if I could stop by. "Of course," she said, her voice warm and welcoming. "I'll be home all afternoon." I arrived later that day, parking my old van in its usual spot in her driveway. I walked up the stone path to her front door, feeling a knot of nerves tighten in my stomach. This felt different from any other visit. We shook hands across the cool quartz countertop. That single handshake felt like a monumental shift. It wasn't just business, and it wasn't romantic. It was something else entirely, a space in between built on mutual respect and a shared understanding. The next few weeks were a blur of exhilarating progress. Sophia had the funds wired to my business account, and I immediately put them to use. I bought a newer, more reliable work van, and had my company logo professionally applied to the side. I upgraded all my primary tools, investing in equipment that was safer, more efficient, and capable of a higher level of precision. I was even able to hire my first part-time helper, a younger guy from the neighborhood named Liam. My business began to grow at a rate I had never imagined possible. By the end of the season, I had a waiting list of clients and was booked solid for weeks in advance. Word of my meticulous work had spread like wildfire. I was no longer just the kid in the beat-up van. I was the proprietor of a reputable company. Sophia remained my client, and the work on the music room continued. Occasionally, after a long day's work, we'd sit on her back patio, sipping iced tea and talking about life as the sun set over her perfect yard. I held up my end of our bargain and started making monthly loan repayments. She never once mentioned the money or checked up on it, but I made sure the payment was the first one I made every month. Our relationship settled into a comfortable, professional friendship. There were no more suggestive comments, no blurred lines, no drama. It was as if we both implicitly understood that what we had was unique and didn't need to be defined or complicated. By the end of that year, my company had flourished beyond my wildest dreams. I finally had enough money saved to start seriously looking for a small house of my own, one with a garage I could convert into a workshop. One afternoon, as I was packing up my tools from Sophia's property for what must have been the 50th time, she walked over. The music room was finished, a masterpiece of acoustic engineering. "You've really done it, Ethan," she said, a clear note of pride in her voice. "I couldn't have done it without your help." I admitted, my gratitude genuine. She smiled. "You would have found a way eventually. I just helped it happen a little sooner. Sometimes all it takes is the right person at the right time. This was mine."